All right, I think this gave enough time to everybody to come. So welcome to the second coordination roundtable on the assistance to victims of explosive ordnance. My name is Nick. I'm one of the mine action program managers at DRC, and I oversee also the victim assistance portfolio. And I'm very happy to introduce here with me Sergiy Musiyenko, who will, from here on out, be the assigned person for the working group on victim assistance from DRC. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you everybody for joining. This is like a hybrid event, so there's people online, there's people in person, so let's just be patient to that sort of modality here. You have translation options to Ukrainian, to English, and there's also a sign interpretation that is available for everybody. This roundtable, as before, is supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. It works under the Mine Action subcluster, or currently named the Mine Action Area of Responsibility for Ukraine. And it's hosted both by the Danish Refugee Council and Humanity and Inclusion. In terms of some logistical information, mostly for people that are here in person, but also for those online, we will have the first session jointly, and then we will break into 3 different rooms that all work simultaneously. There, the translation is no longer concurrent, but it comes after you speak. So just speak slightly slower and pause a little bit so that the translator can catch up with you. The sign interpreter, there's one person for that, and so if there's a need for a specific breakout room, let us know and we'll assign the interpreter to that room. Otherwise, in the first and the last session, they're done at the same time as I speak. There's one coffee break that is envisioned at 12:30 for 30 minutes. However, there will likely be a smaller break also between the breakout rooms, since they last for 2 hours, and that's quite a lot of time for people not to be able to take a little bit of a rest. And I think that kind of covers all of the logistical information. But if there's big questions, let us know. For you to understand, and most of you or all of you have the agenda in front of you as well, and it will shared with you beforehand as well. We will now be going into the first session where we'll discuss the terms of references for the Victim Assistance Working Group. We prepared a sort of a rough draft, and we will be inviting everybody to comment if things have been missed, if things should be corrected. Essentially, we're inviting everybody to chime in on their opinions on the TOR. The TOR will still be, you'll get an additional week if you want to comment after the roundtable as well. After that, we'll start finalizing it, and then it will be shared with everybody. The TOR is quite an important document for a group like ourselves, like ours, because it gives us a little bit of a guidance, of a direction, and sort of sets the mandate. And especially it sets the mandate in a way that doesn't duplicate the work of other clusters and other working groups, since the Victim Assistance Working Group will oftentimes have topics from different other coordination groups as well. And then the first breakout room will be dedicated to the financial assistance to victims of explosive ordnance. We're very happy to have Mr. Matvilchuk, the General Director of Targeted Assistance from the Ministry of Social Policy, gave a presentation on the financial assistance offered by the government of Ukraine. And then I'm also very happy that Stephen from DRC, our economic recovery coordinator, has joined us to help us also coordinate about the financial assistance that INGOs and local NGOs and other organizations provide to victims of EOs. The second breakout room will be dedicated to decreasing stigma around people with disabilities. And I'm very happy that Humanity and Inclusion, Stephanie, their humanitarian inclusion specialist, has joined us and will lead this breakout room on different topics. And then finally, the breakout room number 3 is dedicated to the database of accidents and victims of explosive ordnance that is held and managed by the Ministry of Temporary Occupied Territories. So we will have Mr. Rabiec, the Chief of Humanitarian, the mining sector, from the Ministry of Reintegration, lead that session. In terms of logistics for the people here in person, this is the room for breakout room number 1. So if you've assigned yourself or you have an interest in that room, you can just stay here. There is, and then on the left side when you exit, there's 2 rooms for number 1 and number 2. They have the paper on the door, so you're able to find your way. But if you get lost, just find somebody with DRC logo on their shirt and they'll help you get sorted in that regard. And then we will break for coffee for 30 minutes. And then finally, the last session is just going to debrief you on the proceedings of each breakout room so that you're all up to speed. And then we'll also be discussing both the challenges that we as a group identified last time and if there's been any new ones that have emerged since. Afterwards, all of you will get a recording of all of the breakout rooms so you can look at them more in depth. And then we will also, like last time, send a survey asking you once again what you as members of this working group believe to be the most pressing challenges to continue discussing in the next roundtable that DRC will be organizing and Sergiy here will be in charge. And so we invite you also to put your feedback on those things because this is sort of like a collaborative group and it's important for us to take it into a direction that all of you believe to be important. And that pretty much sets the entire agenda for today. Should all go well, at about 2 o'clock Kiev time, we shall finish. If there's no questions on that, okay, nothing online, then we will proceed with the first discussion, which is dedicated to the terms of references. You've all received this in advance in different languages as well, and we'll just go slowly, almost paragraph by paragraph, not reading it out entirely because that would take too much time, but still giving you a little bit of an opportunity to express any feedback. The first chapter of the terms of references essentially sets the scene for victim assistance in Ukraine. It describes sort of different data that we have about the casualties since the escalation of the war last year in February. Those, of course, have been done up until the last available data in May, and they could be changed as we go forward to be up to speed all the time. There are some excerpts from the International Mine Action Standards 1310 on victim assistance, and generally you will see that the TOR that DRC and HI put together here will be looking at IMAS 1310 for the overall direction. And so it will describe the elements that we in Mine Action put under victim assistance. Those would be data collection, emergency and continuing medical care, rehabilitation, psychological and psychosocial support, and socioeconomic inclusion, as well as different laws and policies designed to protect the rights, eliminate discrimination, and equalize opportunities. Those often come directly to victims of explosive ordnance, but also to people with disabilities generally. And so keep that in mind. And then it gives you a little bit of a background on how this working group was set up, with DRC organizing the first coordination roundtable in March, and then with Humanity and Inclusion joining us in May as the co-chair of the working group. The working group works, as I've said before, under the overall supervision of the Mine Action Area of Responsibility for Ukraine, led by UNDP. And so I will break here and give you the opportunity to express any feedback on this portion of the TOR before we move onwards with it. If there's any comments or suggestions on what else to include in this section of it. Nothing from the online participants. Nothing that I see from the in-person ones. That's great. Like I said, you will have another week to send in feedback afterwards. We understand putting you on the spot right now might not be ideal for everybody. So there will be options for you to send in critiques or suggestions afterwards as well. The next two things that are going to be discussed is the overall objective and the structure of the working group. As you will see, there's, let's say, two core objectives of the working group. The first one is certainly to support or continue supporting the Ministry of Reintegration of Temporary Occupied Territories in Ukraine as the responsible ministry for victim assistance, in making victim assistance part of the broader national humanitarian mine action response. And then the second broader objective is to coordinate different activities of VA actors and those related to victim assistance, to have a platform for collaboration and coordination between different both ministries and actors, and then also always including what we in Mine Action refer to as survivor organizations or the disability movement in these discussions. As I mentioned before, quoting it from IMAS 1310, these are the elements that we will be mostly looking at. That doesn't mean that things outside of it cannot also be discussed. But those are sort of the directions that are given to us by the international standards on victim assistance. I'll break for the overall objective if there's any feedback on that. Go ahead, sir. If you don't mind just introducing yourself and the organization you come from, that would be great.
Добрий день, Національна асамблея людей з інвалідністю, Юрій Васильченко. Я пропоную також включити в загальну мету не тільки допомога постраждалим, а і запобігання саме тому, щоб люди не тобто запобігання цим травмам, тобто такого плану. Тобто ми маємо працювати не тільки з тими, хто вже постраждав, а робити також якусь діяльність, щоб цього не відбувалося. Дякую.
That's an excellent suggestion. Thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. In the mine action subcluster or the mine action activities broadly, there's also a lot of work being done on explosive ordnance risk education, which is one of those activities that is envisioned to be preventative in terms of people getting into injuries. But nevertheless, a great suggestion. Thank you very much for that. Anybody else or anybody from online? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the structure of it. And again, this is a rough draft and a suggestion for everybody to comment on, so don't take this as set in stone. Within the Victim Assistance Working Group, we'll work within the context of the Mine Action Area of Responsibility, which used to be referred as the Mine Action Subcluster. It will initially endeavor to meet monthly. There's quite a lot of organization that goes into roundtables like this. We might not always be doing it every month, but we do try, I think right now, every 2 months we've been able to do it. And thanks to the support from the MFA in Netherlands, we do have funding for more of these roundtables going forward. And so we're happy to try to keep with the pace of what we've done so far. Currently, and there was an open invitation for the co-chairing positions. DRC and HI volunteered for now. And sort of the suggestion here is that the chairing positions may be subject to change every 2 years if, of course, there is a different organization that would like to chair that. It doesn't necessarily have to be an INGO, can be a local NGO, can be a local organization or network, and so on and so forth. So the invitation there is for everybody. And then initially we intended to have it for 2 years and then have that open invitation again. Yes. And of course, the invited ministries are those that we've so far identified as being related to victim assistance in Ukraine. That, of course, is the Ministry of Reintegration, Ministry of Social Policy, Ministry of Education and Science, and Ministry of Health, as well as then related humanitarian clusters. From our point of view, certainly the mine action subcluster or mine action area of responsibility, protection, health, education, the cash working group as well. All of those are always warmly invited, and we make everything possible for them to be here with us, and most often, and so far they have been. And then within the working group, if there is any action point that needs to be discussed with the broader mine action community, that is then brought up to the attention of the mine action area of responsibility or whatever other cluster / ministry that might be responsible for that. We have at the end included an empty list of working group members. Our suggestion right now is that every organization that had previously or today registered for the event be put on that list. And then if you wish not to be on that list, you tell us and we will remove you. We will not be sharing private information, only the name of your organization will be listed, and usually there will be a focal point at least named, but it will be Sergiy here who will be able to then coordinate and make referrals and put you in touch with each other. So once again, I open up the floor for any suggestions or critiques. Very well, thank you very much. We then press onwards with the areas of responsibility. Areas of activity. Like I said, when HI and DRC, with the feedback from UNDP, were putting together this TOR, we looked at the IMAS. IMAS describes the duties and responsibilities of victim assistance for various duty bearers. One of them is the National Mine Action Authority, which in Ukraine is the Ministry of Defense, the National Mine Action Center, and there's a few here in Ukraine, one in Kamenets-Podilsky, one in Chernihiv, and one within the State Emergency Services. And then it also describes the mandate of mine action operators like DRC or Humanity and Inclusion, as well as the duties and responsibilities of survivor organizations. Looking at all of those responsibilities, we've put together sort of the direction and the areas of activity for the working group. So it comes from all four respective stakeholders and puts together our sort of guide on where to go with the working group. And so we will go now one by one, and I will here break after each one of them. Otherwise, it might be too much information. The first one is to provide the platform for the coordination of victim assistance services, including sharing information on the needs and priorities and highlighting resourcing gaps, both among the victim assistance working group members and relevant stakeholders, such as donors. And there are quite a few donors that usually have attended the working group itself. So that's an advantageous point for us to bring to their attention. Is there any disagreement with point number one? Anything from online? No? Okay. Very well. Thank you. And then point number two is to promote the collection of sex, age, and disability disaggregated data on victims and their needs, to support the improvement of information management system for mine action, the IMSMA, data collection forms on victims and accidents, and support the Ministry of Reintegration to ensure availability of this data collected, taking into consideration, of course, the national data protection regulations. Any disagreement on this point? All good? Mm-hmm. Very well. And you will see today one of the breakout rooms is dedicated to exactly this point. And then thirdly, advocate for the laws and policies, public policies related to human rights and the equalization of opportunities for people with disabilities, inclusive, of course, of victim assistance. Nothing online? The fourth point is to support the adoption and implementation of laws addressing the needs and rights of survivors.
Можливо вивести? Одну хвилинку, будь ласка. Так, будь ласка.
As far as I know, there is no compensation mechanism for those who didn't survive. Maybe something has changed, but it was previous information. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but it would be good also to think about those who did not survive as a result of mine explosions, in particular children. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Indeed, we can add here both survivors and victims. And today in the breakout room session on financial assistance, the Ministry of Social Policy may also brief you on the financial support for those that have been deceased. But thank you very much it's a very good suggestion and will be included. Very well, thank you. We will press onwards. And then I believe point number 5 is to advocate for and support the development on national standards that explain the roles and responsibilities of mine action sector within a state's multi-sector approach to victim assistance. All good? Very well. Thank you. Going forward, it's to develop advocacy packages with key messages for victim assistance and for awareness raising at the community level to avoid social stigma and negative attitudes toward people with disabilities generally and then victims of explosive ordnance specifically. Moving forwards, it is to raise the awareness on non-mine action government entities that are responsible for various elements of victim assistance to survivors and victims' needs and rights, and proactively collaborate with them to integrate victim assistance in their policies and programs. Going forward, thank you. It is, I've lost the numbering of the points here. We should have done that we'll correct that. Through service mapping, compile a directory of a guide of services that are locally available to victims in local languages and ensure it is made available to stakeholders that may interact with affected communities. Very well. And going forward, it's to advocate for the reinforcement of victim assistance services, including emergency and continuing medical care, rehabilitation, psychological and psychosocial support, and socioeconomic inclusion, and highlighting priority locations for those services. Okay. And then finally, to provide the necessary support for any victim assistance activities undertaken through international support. Perfect. Thank you very much. It seems that so far, at least with 2 great contributions, however, the TOR seems to be well received, which is good to see. Like I said, you will have another week to send in your comments there as well before this is then adopted as the terms of references. Just out of curiosity, perhaps I have not mentioned anything, or we have not mentioned anything that you would like to add. It doesn't mean that this is the final number of the points. So I'll just give an opportunity for anybody to mention anything to additionally add to the list. Very well, thank you very much. This concludes the first session, actually in quite good timing. We will now then break for about 10 minutes and just check with the leads of the breakout rooms if they're all set to start with them. And so feel free to take a break, a coffee break, and then one of our staff is going to let you know when we're ready to proceed with the next session. But thank you very much for your participation in session number 1. I believe logistically also for online participation, it will be possible to break in individual rooms. And then again, the recording of all of them will be shared afterwards, so you're able to get up to speed. Okay, thank you very much, and then see you in about 10 and 15 minutes.